بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي شرع الإسلام وسهل شرائعه لمن ورده وأعز أركانه على من غالبه فجعله أمنا لمن علقه وسلما لمن دخله برهانا لمن تكلم به ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنام محمد بن القاسم وعلى آله الأطهار وصحبه المنتجبين. We praise Allah. This is part of a sermon in Nahj al-Balagha. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who established Islam and made it easy for those who approach it, and strengthened it against those who intend to overpower it and harm it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it a source of peace for those who cling to it, a source of safety for those who enter it, a source of reasoning for those who speak about it. And we also convey our peace to the chosen Prophet of Islam and his pure progenies. Last night, in attempting to explain or unpack, deliberate our responsibilities these days, I pointed out that there are three different circles that we have responsibility or at least obligation to. There is the smaller circle, the inner circle, which constitute the Shia community. Has its own unique culture. As some of the questions tonight came from the younger brothers, they were asking about the root and the background of these cultures. Where are they from? Then comes the larger circle, which is the Muslim community at large. And how do we communicate with them? Then comes the outer circle, which constitutes the community, the larger community, the Muslim, not only the Muslim community, but the larger community that are around. We may have, from a jurisprudential basis, huge amount in common between the first circle and the second circle. Although we may differ on some fundamental principles of theology, if some group following the Ash'ari school of theology rather than the Mu'tazili school of theology, vis-a-vis the Ja'fari school of theology. But at least leaving the theological issues out, we have huge amount in common, like two circles with an overlap. Because of these fundamental differences, the theological differences, it makes it complicated to make certain assumptions and simply choose a methodology that worked in, say, the smaller circle, the Shia community, and assume that it's going to work somewhere else. Let me give you an example. We all know from our the Shia theological point of view, that Abu Hanifa studied under the leadership, or came to the fifth Imam, studied under the fifth Imam as well as the sixth Imam. It makes sense if you imagine Shia theological principle that Imams have some kind of connection to Ilm al-Ghaib and they are educated, divinely educated. It doesn't matter whether they are 4 years old or 60 years old. If you look at the narrative that has been constructed to challenge this kind of thesis, that Abu Hanifa studied under Imam, the 5th Imam and 6th Imam, they go to the age of the 6th Imam. And they say, well, he was only 8 years old. Abu Hanifa was born, say, 20 years before that. So a child or a man of 20 or 25 years old rationally doesn't make sense to study under a child or even enter into an argument with a child of 6 years old. This clearly defines where we are theologically. From Kalam perspective, this difference makes it critical how you're trying to explain the whole principle of, say, Imam, and particularly Shia understanding of it. Now, if you try to move out and cross this boundary from now conversation with people that you have an overlap to people that at least theologically you hardly have anything in common, where do we go from here? That was on what we call our target audience, the challenge that creates. On a personal level, there are a number of challenges that we have to deal with. We need to equip ourselves, and I recited the hadith, من نصب نفسه إماما فليبدأ بتعليم نفسه قبل تعليم غيره. If you are going to take this mantle and the challenge of becoming a messenger. Let's go back, say, to this notion of Karbala. We had the message, as an example, we had the message of Islam on the one hand. The messenger was Imam Hussein. The target audience were a group of people, a special group of people. Over 1,400 years, the message of Hussein and the message of Islam are condensed together as one message. We are supposed to become the ambassadors and the agents that would deliver this. That's number two. Number three is the target audience, which is it's more complex and paradoxical. So, how can we as individuals or group collectively, what are the conditions that we need to fulfill so that we become qualified individuals to be able to be the agent, the ambassador, qualified individuals that we could go out and deliver the message? May I ask the sisters who are sitting right in the back to give me half an hour or so, and then we will be able to create some times for conversation. I said that the process starts first and foremost with ma'rifatun nafs. And by the way, this concept of self-understanding and self-reflection is critical in our literature. Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah. And I tried last night to expand on this, that this ma'rifah, understanding of oneself, that is linked to the understanding of the divine, is not the physical reality. It's the spiritual dimension of our existence that we really need to pay attention to, where we links to the divine. Because going back to the Genesis from an Islamic point of view, why is it so hot tonight? I thought the air conditioning are working. The air conditioning is a bit temperamental, so it just switches by itself on, and then when it doesn't like the crowd or too much heat, it switches off. So it's not me, it's just everyone. Yeah, if you put it somewhere around there. So the ma'rifatun nafs, we have to go back. Sisters, would you please sit down?
Location is fine.
Yeah, that's fine. You just take it towards me. Ma'rifatun nafs, self-understanding and self-reflection, which is necessary, is the spiritual dimension that we need to pay attention to. And for the simple reason that there is, again, another Arabic expression that says, فَاقِدُ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْضِي. If you don't have it, you can't give it. If you are not equipped intellectually and from the knowledge of Islam as a basic principle, that's number one. Who you are and what is your role within this cosmic order. And if you are unable to take this message and deliver it to somebody else, you will not make a successful attempt and you will fail. The first stage in this long process of self-analysis, self-reflection, is to look at what Islam considers to be, last night I mentioned this, that if we look at the Quran and insan from a Quranic perspective, there are a number of commendations and criticism, depending on what we call the negative or the positive traits. The first step in the process of becoming agents to deliver the message to the community is to avoid the negative images that Quran says these are the source of condemnation. Arrogance, ignorance, deceit, lies, backbiting, disrespect, ghiba, intolerance, lack of hope, egocentric. These are among a long list of negative traits that Islam says if you have them, then you deserve to be condemned. Because there are a number of verses that specifically says, for example, Islam, al-insanu la yatgha an ra'ahu istaghna. When you become rich, you become unruly. Why? Because primarily a person which is egocentric, everything in this world is for me, for my benefit, becomes unruly and not able to control himself or herself when they become slightly rich and have material possessions. So the list are, this is what only few of them is an extensive list. You need to go to books on akhlaq and ethics and morality to see these negative traits. But the major ones that Quran specifically mentions: ignorance, arrogance, deceit, backbiting, intolerance, ghiba, egocentric, and so on and so on. That's the first step. So we really need to look at ourselves. If we constantly backbite, forget about becoming an ambassador or an agent of hope for somebody else. If you have no understanding about your position in a society and your role within the society, you can't become an ambassador of hope and peace. I deliberately chose the early khutbah, the part of the sermon, that says, Alhamdulillah alladhi sharra'a al-Islam fasahhala sharayahu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this religion and it's made it easy. وَأَعَزَّ أَرْكَانَهُ عَلَى مَنْ غَلَبَ, and made the principles, strengthen the principles against those who intend to harm it. Allah made it a source of peace for those who cling to it, and source of safety for those who enter it. If we are unable to create peace and safety for those who approach Islam, there is something problematic in our reading and interpretation of the faith. In the same steps that we take to eradicate the negative traits, we need to actively engage and gain the necessary powers, which means the traits, the positive traits that Quran praises a human being for having them. First, to be God-centric. In every equation in your life, God comes first, not last. God is not the spare tire that you only use it when you have a puncture in the car. No. First and foremost, in everything that you do in your life, God-centric. Then comes patient, search for truth, respect, tolerance, accountability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, humility, etc., etc., etc. So, first, we really need to build the character. And then move the stage as far as the learning curve. Now, here comes the fundamental problem. How do we learn when we have these three different stages that we have to deal with, or three centers, or three circles that we have to deal with? A young child, a young boy, a Muslim, a younger brother tells me that, well, quite rightly, this is his understanding. If we are trying to tell the child, our children, that look, Tawheed constitutes the fundamental principle of faith. Everything centers around Tawheed. And then you give an image to the child that Imams are somehow revered and even worshipped. Now, here is the misinterpretation. It might be by the child. It might be our mistake. We have not delivered the message correctly. If our children fail to understand the message, then we have a critical, fundamental problem when we cross the boundaries into some larger circle, and from there into some larger circle. Not only we need, you see, we are constantly at the competition. I said there are two brands of Islam. Ashura represents it. The conflict between Uthman and Abu Dhar represents it. The conflict between Muawiyah and Ali. Two brands of Islam. In our contemporary life, we have a brand which the Salafi on the one hand, the Muslim Brotherhood on the other, congregate on it. And we have, I call it, the Fox News version of Islam. Because there is a reason why they give so much air of publicity to this group of people. They are intolerant, it doesn't matter. It fits within the image that they want to create about Islam. They kill, that's fine, because we can use it, that the reduction of Islam only to the Saudi definition of it, etc., etc. I mean, can you imagine, beginning of the 21st century, a Shia scholar in Egypt will be assassinated. We talk about what happened to Muslim in, say, 1,400 years ago, where he is killed, thrown from Dar al-Imara, from the building, and then a rope tied to his feet and pulled along the streets. Sheikh Shahata was done the same thing. In Cairo, which used to be at the center of the Fatimite dynasty, Shia Islam for huge, at least 1 or 2 centuries. Al-Azhar, the current Al-Azhar, was built by the Fatimite. There are Hoja brothers and Bohras that still, even today, they go there, take pictures to show the architecture of the Fatimite dynasties. You kill, you tie a rope to his feet, and the pictures are on YouTube, and you pull him on the street simply because he accepts a different brand of Islam that doesn't agree with you. This is the conflict. Ashura and Karbala and all other epical events, historical events, are trying to present a framework for us that, look, Haqq and Batil ultimately will create two different images. Islam, once Batil took over, becomes an empty shell. You practice your faith, but it's devoid of the spirit. Shallow understanding of the faith. Now look at 1 year of Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. What was the narrow conversation? How big a beard you have? How short mustaches you have? How big a sign of sujda you have in front of you? You can create it very quickly. Let me give you the technique. Just get a small cup, and this is laws of physics. Put a piece of cotton lit it, put it on the bottom of the cup, oxygen disappears, straight in front of your forehead. Leave it there for about 5 or 10 minutes. The first sign of the good sajda starts. Repeat it for a couple of times. There it goes. You've got the sajda of the Holy Prophet. Astaghfirullah. Reduction. The entire Islam has been reduced to what? These kind of conversations. And then the guy goes from Egypt, invited to go for the conference on Wahda, the unity of Muslims, starts his lecture, Assalamu ala Abu Bakr wa Umar. As if we have nothing else to do and to talk about but the old classical polemical argument. What about the Egyptian economy? What about Egyptian equality? What about the laws that were passed against women in Egypt? What about everything else was reduced to prayer? Long beards and everything, and the sajjada on your forehead. These two images go side by side. Sisters and brothers, I said, one of the fundamental problems that we have is that there was no period in between where one narrative, one literature was taken out and replaced by another literature. Ali lived side by side with Muawiyah. Abu Dhar lived side by side with Uthman. Hussein lived side by side with Yazid, and so on and so forth. The two narratives always lived side by side. It's for us, if we are educated enough, go to the 4 what I call preconditions for analysis. If we are intelligent enough, if we use our power of intellect, remember the verse in the Holy Quran that says on the Day of Judgment, huge number of people will deserve to be sent to be punished for the simple reason that God gave them the power of intellect and they did not use it. Not only the power of intellect has to be used in deciding which brand of Islam, the power of intellect has to be used in deciding what narrative is critical in what position and what place. A child has a question, says, why do people do this latmiyas and beat their chest? A Muslim child finds it very difficult to accept that narrative that may have made sense 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 400 years ago in some obscure places or even in cities and countries, not here for the sake of God. Spend time, qualitative time for your children. I go back to the question that was raised by the sister a couple of nights ago. Unfortunately, the attempt to spend huge amount of time purely focused on material gain is at the expense of family and the future of our children. Now you are trying to become the ambassador of hope and peace, to go and now teach it somewhere else that has nothing to do, nothing in common. Well, there are 2 ways of doing with it. Either ta'ziyah, which from technical narrative we call it passion plays. You use passion plays or ta'ziyah hoping that it would create an image in the mind of people that replicates the crisis of Ashura. From a scientific point of view, brothers and sisters, clearly define that this kind of thing will not work in a society that has nothing in common, fundamentally nothing in common with you. Passion play will not work. What's the second approach? It's the value system. Sisters, it's disheartening. If you want to play with your TV, videos, games, anything else, I really have no objection to it. You can find a quiet corner and sit in the back and play. But right sitting there and trying to chit-chat and playing with the phone, I think it's, as far as etiquette, is not acceptable. And this is one of the fundamental issues that we have to bring it down to in our community. I go to synagogues in Colorado. 300 families come to the congregation. They ask a Shia scholar to go in there and discuss one critical issue. We may disagree with the rabbi of the synagogue, but they extend the highest respect to me as a scholar. It's a pity that I come to my own center, the Shia center, and I see younger generations playing games with the phones or so on, or sending text messages. Please leave them till another time. So if passion plays, scientifically we don't have any proof that says in a society that really has nothing in common with you, passion play or these images can create a reality or imprint in the mind of those who really have no concept or no precept about it. What's the next stage? Should we throw in the towel and say, well, we can't do anything about it? No, you can't. And that is to learn about the value system. Alhamdulillah, in these days, we have individuals within what we call in-house, within the convert community, that they have taken it upon themselves to create new style of poetry, images, and representation of Karbala, but in a language and in a way that people here understand, rather than in a way that they have no understanding whatsoever. What are the messages? Look at the messages and then take those and start conversation with others. These days, we talk about living free. This is at the end, this is the land of free and whatever, at least on paper. The land of free. Talk the concept of freedom and talk to your, create some conversation with others. Be critical thinkers. يا شيعة آل أبي سفيان إن لم يكن لكم دين فكونوا أحرارا في دنياكم كما تزعمون. O Shia of Al Abi Sufyan, if you don't believe in faith, if you don't believe in Allah, but be free, live free and be a critical thinker. I fight with you. Why are you attacking my family and my women and children? Critical thinking. It's a way we can use as a message to start conversation. Do not submit to tyranny. ألا وإن الداعي ابن الداعي خيرني بين اثنين بين السلة والذلة فهيهات من الذلة. The so and so gave me a choice between capitulation and submission to the power of the day, which is tyrannical. We do not, free livers, we will not accept it. مثلي لا يبايع مثله. Why can't you make this as a message and develop a conversation rather than passion plays? Justice for all. Concept of justice. Remember? Injustice for one is injustice for all. Why can't we use this as a message and talk? Rejection of dehumanized, purposeless existence. Which means you are moving into an area of trying to convince your audience that, look, as a human being is not 9 to 5 of work. It's not just 3,000, 5,000 square feet with 6 cars or 4 cars. There is another purpose in human life. There should be another purpose that we have to focus upon. Now, you're entering into a different fields of conversation that receptive, they will respond. The struggle for liberation from all aspects in all aspects of one life. Now, liberation theology in the Christian field, liberation theology in Buddhist field, liberation theology in the Hindu field, liberation theology in Islamic field, and so on and so forth. Why can't we develop a narrative, a language, a way of communication? What it means, what is the reading that we should give from a faith that right from the beginning says وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. declares, makes a universal declaration that the essence of justice is fundamental to all revelations. Why can't we do that? What about God-centric, instead of being material or egocentric, etc., etc.? So there are inherent messages in Islam. No wonder Imam says, وَبُرْهَانًا لِمَنْ تَكَلَّمَ بِهِ. Not only the source of peace and tranquility, it provides the reasoning for those who want to speak about Islam. We need to really start from scratch. Starting with ourselves. We need not only a different reading from our literature, we really need a different reading from the whole notion of being a human being and the struggle that we have to go through it. There is a hadith from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullah wa alayhi that says, don't be just pure talker. Walk the walk, literally translated, walk the walk. Become the embodiment of the message. As a woman, as a man, as a boy, as a girl, old or young, when you walk in the street, there should be a body language, an aura around you that says, I am a Muslim, I am a Shia, and I'm proud of it. You don't believe me? Let's talk. Not bow yourself. Try to cut corners every day from if the prayer. I leave it. Yasser Arafat, when he was alive, was asked, do you pray? He said, yes. I leave it until 9 o'clock at night, and then I do the whole prayers in one go. A few years ago, a community here in California called me and they said, Imam Kazerooni, would you be prepared to come down for a few days of lecture? But by the way, our community recites Jum'ah prayer on Sunday. Which immediately reminded me of Muawiyah, because on his way back to Sham, went to Masjid al-Kufa and recited Jum'ah prayer on Wednesday. Well, 2 days before, 2 days after, it's not going to make much of a difference. That's the point that I raised last night. We first choose a lifestyle and then try around to see a theological basis to exonerate us. And if we can't find it, try to cut corners. I've already passed the 25 minutes or 20 minutes, so it's been half an hour. Let's end it here, ask the question, and then we continue with our conversation tomorrow night, inshallah. Questions? I thought as we go and get closer to Ashura...
You exhaust questions.
The younger ones, I am keeping them on the edge because tomorrow night I need to see them again. Well, the issue of how did Yazid became Khalifa, there are a number of, history, particularly for the Muslim, for the children, it's long history. I'll give you a website. You go and simply get access to www.alislam.org. And right at the beginning, if you put Yazid, the word in the search section, Yazid, and then it comes up with different articles. Some of them are short history for younger children or young adults. Read. If by tomorrow night your answers are not, or your questions are not given any answer, you still have some more answer, come back to that 7 o'clock meeting that we have, and I'll try to answer. Sisters? Well, no question? Go ahead.
are you saying that it shouldn't, and if it shouldn't, then why is it that it continues to exist together? You say that one should only exist.
What I was trying to say, sister, that it is, I wasn't passing judgment as to why should it or it shouldn't. It's a fact of history. Two brands of Islam, two different interpretations. Yazid has his own interpretation. Muawiyah has his own interpretation. Bani Umayyah has his own interpretation. And Ahlul Bayt, they have their own interpretation. And each interpretation has its own followers. The problem is, for people who theologically differ with us, they equate it. It becomes simply a normative issue. Muawiyah said this, Ali said this. The fundamental theological basis that gives superiority to Ali vis-a-vis Muawiyah is not taken into consideration. And then we have two, from their point of view, two equal narratives. That's it. It's for us, when we want to search and look at the literature, this is why I said we have to go back to the four basic principles, including our own understanding, not only theological basis, but human intellect. Can we, from a rational point of view, put a tyrant next to Ali and say they are equal? For them it doesn't matter, because they will find a justification. Well, yes, he did it, he did a bad thing, but he was Muslim. I mean, this is the concept of Ash'ari Murji'ah within the theological base, that we are not supposed to pass judgment. We have to say, well, both of them, inshallah, God will forgive them on the day of judgment. It's not for us. And by the way, when you look at the early history of Islam, Murji'ah, as these are people who said no judgment to be passed on either Ali or Muawiyah, they were the one that Muawiyah and Bani Umayyah publicized, encouraged their theological basis, because then what? Nobody would criticize. So these, I wasn't passing judgment to see whether they should or they shouldn't. It's simply a factual statement that these two narratives have existed, because technically speaking, I mean, the two criteria, the two types of individuals, أحسن التقويم أسفل السافلين. These are the two criteria, the two ends of the continuum as far as human creation. They always have existed side by side. Satan and Adam, prophets and their opponent, Musa, Pharaoh, Ibrahim, the king of the day, etc., etc., etc. They always existed side by side. When we try to analyze, we really need to bring in this component, the intellectual component, and ask rational questions. Then we will be able to shed light on the whole complex nature of the literature that exists. Okay? It's a bit too late. Well, at least I quickly can deal with the foods such as crab and lobster. I think you really need to go and ask your parents and the books on views of grand scholars that your parents or yourself will ultimately follow to see what they say regarding some crustaceans and so on. As far as Allah, well, again, my advice is to go to alislam.org, and the basic books for children regarding usul din, particularly the concept of tawheed, etc., etc., explained over there. If you read them, and you have still a few questions left, then you can come back. I would like to ask brothers and sisters, and leave you with one advice. If you don't like books, if you detest reading, don't deny the children the opportunity to become bookworms. Because if they are given access to books, good quality books, at least the shortcoming that comes out of our way of lives, that we don't have quality time to go and spend with the children, they can do it themselves. Find very few good websites, informative websites. Encourage them to visit. If you can, we have no TV inside our house. If you can remove these kind of things and instead have time, quality time with the families, sits together and have conversation regarding various issues, then that's something. Encourage your children to read. Because if you don't encourage them, the natural desire or thirst for satisfaction of knowledge would tend to push them towards books that you don't want them to read. So even if you detest something called book, you can't even look at it. Be flexible. Allow your children the privilege and the pleasure of reading books. Bite your finger and sit behind a TV, work with them, let them access websites that inform them. And then they will come back with questions. If you don't, that might encourage you to learn yourself. And if you don't, there is a hadith from Imam Kazerooni, it says, nothing will happen to you if you don't know something, say, I don't, but go and learn. Our children suffer the consequences or things, habitual things that we don't like. Then let them read. So the brother who asked about these questions, I think they need to go to that site. By the way, if you go to the site and then type in, say, crab or crustacean or anything else, there is a book, there are one or two books. Well, time has already gone. I can't talk about the Mukhtar's revolution, but I can discuss it on Thursday, inshallah, when we come back. Because Mukhtar was part of what I call the outcome, the implication of the uprising of Karbala that led to a number